OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google DeepMind leaders meet with world governments at the Zevin Summit. SpaceX buys Cursor for $60 billion, and ChatGPT loses its majority share for the first time since its launch. Welcome to DJAMGAMIND Daily AI Intelligence for June 17th, 2026. I'm Anna. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Nomen, senior software engineer and passionate soccer dad from Canada. Today, we may be witnessing the emergence of the next phase of artificial intelligence. At the G7 summit in France, AI leaders sat down with heads of state to discuss international rules, trusted partnerships, and the future governance of frontier AI. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's SpaceX has expanded its AI ambitions with the acquisition of Cursor, and open-source models are rapidly approaching the capabilities of the world's most advanced closed systems. At the same time, OpenAI's losses are exploding, ChatGPT's market share is slipping below 50%, and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella is warning companies that renting intelligence may not be enough. We'll also examine Meta's internal struggles, the rise of AI agents, and why the next AI battle may have less to do with chatbots and more with ecosystems. Let's unravel the future.
In 2025, OpenAI generated just over $13 billion in revenue, which, for almost any software company on Earth, that is an absolute fantasy.
Right, it's the ultimate dream scenario.
Exactly. And yet, while bringing in that $13 billion, they somehow managed to post a net loss of over $38 billion in a single year.
Yeah, it's almost hard to comprehend.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at why the AI financial bubble is violently colliding with global geopolitics. For this briefing, our mission is to act as forensic venture strategists and sovereign risk analysts for the DJAMGAMIND intelligence channel. And as a reminder, this deep dive is researched and produced by Etienne Nomen, senior software engineer and founder at DJAMGAMIND based in Canada.
And it's a profound collision we're looking at today. We're going to analyze this structural shift where the sheer, mathematical weight of computing costs is just completely fracturing the global tech ecosystem.
Yeah. So today's date is June 17th, 2026. And the core narrative we're unpacking is, quote, the fragmentation of frontier alliances and the monetization of token capital. But before we get into the heavy data, I do need to take a quick pause here.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea given the sources today.
Right, because our sources today contain some highly sensitive, politically charged actions from global entities, including the Trump administration and the European Commission. So we want to be crystal clear with you. We do not take sides, nor do we endorse the viewpoints of any political entity mentioned. Our strict mandate is to impartially convey the factual intelligence contained in today's source material.
Which is exactly the framework this moment requires. We need to be clinical here, mathematically rigid. Because if we look at the macro-political level first, the overarching narrative of a unified, Western-led AI monopoly has, it's officially broken down.
Completely fractured.
Exactly. The cracks were fully exposed at the recent G7 summit in Evian-le-Bain, France. You had these top technology leaders, Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, Demis, Hassabis, sitting at the same table with U.S. leadership.
Right. President Trump, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, Marco Rubio.
Yeah, heavy hitters. And the agenda was supposedly about establishing unified global AI development rules. But the reality in that room was very different.
Yeah, because instead of unity, we saw this attempt to build a fortress. Commerce Secretary Lutnick pitched this thing called a Trusted Partner AI Pact. And from my reading of the briefing, the goal is basically to create a VIP club for compute.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
The U.S. wants to give allied nations priority access to the absolute highest tier frontier models while explicitly locking out adversaries. Specifically China.
Right. It is a very clear strategic intent to build an impenetrable sovereign moat around Western AI capabilities. The problem, though, is that the U.S.'s closest allies are completely rejecting the premise.
Right to their faces.
Yes. The European Commission's Henna Virkkunen aggressively pushed back, calling these U.S. export controls outright, quote, discriminatory. And simultaneously, the Trump administration flat-out rejected UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's request to exempt G7 allies from those very bans.
It's essentially diplomatic friendly fire.
Exactly. And the friction isn't just international. It's happening right inside the U.S. tech sector.
Yeah.
The focal point of this entire blockade seems to be Anthropic.
Oh, yeah. The Commerce Department actively blocked the export of Anthropic's Fable and Mythos 5 models, citing, national security concerns. But if you look at the New York Times reporting, the internal sentiment at Anthropic is that this has absolutely nothing to do with security.
Not at all.
Employees actually suspect they're being singled out over a political grudge. The exact phrase they use, which is wild for a geopolitical briefing, was that they're being bullied based on bad vibes.
Yeah, and when policy is dictated by bad vibes, you inevitably create massive collateral damage in your critical infrastructure. This blockade has triggered a huge, organized reaction from the cybersecurity sector.
The open letter.
Yes. Over 100 cybersecurity executives, industry heavyweights like Alex Stamos, alongside leaders from Adobe, Zoom, NVIDIA, they just published this free Fable open letter. Their core argument is that banning the export of these advanced models is actually handcuffing the defenders.
Because the bad guys already have similar tools.
Exactly.
The letter specifically points out that adversarial models, like OpenAI's Daybreak, are already doing the exact same kind of automated flaw finding. So are we basically treating these AI models like nuclear stockpiles, but locking our own cybersecurity engineers out of the silo while the blueprint is already leaking to adversaries?
I mean, the nuclear silo analogy captures the dynamic perfectly. In cybersecurity, a discovered vulnerability in a model like Fable 5 isn't just a weapon, it's a proof of concept. Defensive teams absolutely require access to that specific mechanism to harden their own networks.
Right, they need to see how it breaks to fix it.
Yeah, precisely. By restricting access based on this rigid nationalistic framework, the U.S. policy inadvertently blinds the allied defensive apparatus.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the open source community and adversarial states continue to just iterate on those exact same capabilities in the dark.
So Washington is desperately trying to build this massive geopolitical moat at the G7, but they're facing resistance from the EU, the UK, and their own cybersecurity industry.
Yeah.
But the real issue is that the moat itself is an illusion. The sovereign blockade is cracking because the underlying financial structure of frontier AI is just collapsing under its own weight. We have to talk about those audited OpenAI numbers verified by the Financial Times.
We do. Because the clinical math of OpenAI's 2025 balance sheet is critical for understanding the current macroeconomic panic. Like you mentioned at the start, they generated $13.07 billion in revenue.
Which is incredible on its own.
It is. But that top-line success is entirely wiped out by $34 billion in total costs and expenses. And we drilled down into that. $19.18 billion of that was burned purely on research and development.
Hey, $19 billion just on R&D.
Just on R&D. They are vaporizing nearly $20 billion purely on the compute, energy, and hardware required to train these systems. And that's before factoring in basic data to operations.
And then there's the structural penalty. Because they converted from a nonprofit to a for-profit structure, that triggered this massive accounting nightmare. It was a $41.5 billion loss from changes in fair value.
A staggering hit.
So if you look at the gross net loss before moving non-controlling interest, OpenAI hit $60.35 billion. That is an unbelievable hemorrhage. And it's not just them, right?
No, it's systemic. Look at NVIDIA. They're currently out in the debt markets, raising $20 billion through 2 to 30-year bonds managed by JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, just to keep funding this hardware build-out.
And Anthropic is dealing with a federal lawsuit accusing them of overselling Claude subscriptions because they actually have to throttle usage way below their advertised limits just to save on compute costs.
Right. The compute is just too expensive.
So with a $38 billion operating hemorrhage, I have to ask, is OpenAI actually a functioning business at this point, or are they just a subsidized compute sinkhole hoping to achieve AGI before the bond market cuts them off?
Well, from a forensic venture analysis perspective, they're operating much more like a sovereign infrastructure project than a traditional SaaS business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The fair value loss is a paper reality of corporate restructuring, sure, but that $19 billion R&D burn, that is hard cash vaporizing into server farms. NVIDIA raising $20 billion in the bond market indicates that the entire ecosystem is currently floating on leveraged tech debt.
Wow.
If these frontier labs cannot figure out how to monetize their models fast enough to outpace their computing costs, the debt markets will eventually enforce a brutal systemic correction.
When OpenAI's audited losses explode past $38 billion in a single year, and tech giants like Microsoft are forced to integrate external open source models just to survive the compounding costs of autonomous task loops, Throwing unmonitored cloud compute at your business is financial suicide. You need absolute structural visibility. We want to thank our sponsor, ARRA, for making today's briefing possible. ARRA provides the precise, enterprise-grade AI management platform that modern organizations need to manage multi-model portfolios, track exact token capitalization, and enforce strict regulatory compliance. Lock down your enterprise compute architecture via the link in our show notes.
And that transition from OpenAI's financial crisis to Microsoft's current strategic pivot, it's the perfect illustration of this desperation in the market.
Right.
To manage these compounding costs, the major tech giants are quietly abandoning the unified Western alliance narrative in favor of pure economic survival.
We are seeing it happen in real time with Copilot. Microsoft is moving their Copilot Cowork agent to usage-based pricing. Their executive VP for Copilot, Charles Lamanna, openly admitted that users who are automating hundreds of tasks a week are generating what he literally called bonkers bills.
Because the agents are always running.
Exactly. When you have an agent running continuously prompting itself, checking its work, eating tokens in the background, unlimited use pricing becomes mathematically impossible. So what is Microsoft's emergency pivot here? They are officially exploring hosting a fine-tuned version of China's DeepSeek v4 on Azure.
Yeah.
They are actively looking to Chinese models as a cheaper alternative to Anthropic and OpenAI.
Which represents a profound structural shift.
Yeah.
DeepSeek has massive momentum right now. The startup recently raised over $7.4 billion, pushing their valuation past $50 billion. And their founder, Liang Wenfeng, personally contributed $3 billion of that round.
Wow.
But the deeper existential threat to the Western frontier monopoly is what we call the open weights contagion. A Chinese AI lab known as ZAI just released a model called GLM-5 and they released it under a highly permissive MIT license.
Meaning anyone can use it or commercialize it for free.
Exactly.
For free. And the specs on this are wild. It has a 1 million token context window. I mean, you could drop an entire corporate code base or a whole library of books into a single prompt.
Yes, the capacity is massive.
And across critical coding benchmarks, GLM 5.2 is rivaling top-tier closed Western systems like GPT-5.5 and Claude Opus 4.8. And it does it for pennies.
But hold on, I have to ask about the geopolitical contradiction here.
Go for it.
If Microsoft, the absolute anchor of American tech, has to rely on Chinese models just to make their unit economics work, doesn't that immediately invalidate the entire trusted partner pact Lutnick was pitching in France? Completely. I mean, Microsoft is attempting to thread an incredibly fine needle here. Their argument is that by hosting DeepSeek v4 entirely within their Azure cloud infrastructure, they maintain total customer data sovereignty and enterprise security. The data doesn't leave the U.S.
Right, but economically?
Economically, your assessment is spot on. The entire premise of a trusted partner pact assumes that the U.S. and its allies hold a monopoly on the capability itself. Models like GLM 5.2 and DeepSeek v4 prove that the capability moat has completely evaporated. The Western capital structure simply cannot sustain the exorbitant cost of closed proprietary models when open weights alternatives are flooding the market, offering the same intelligence for a fraction of the cost.
Because foundation models are commoditizing, the AI model is no longer the product, it's just raw material. And because it's too expensive to exclusively rent, the center of gravity in the tech world is violently shifting away from the models themselves.
Toward the agents.
Toward the proprietary autonomous systems, the agents that utilize them. Satya Nadella just released a memo that completely redefines corporate value along these lines.
And Nadella's framing in that memo is mathematically precise. He divides a modern corporation's value into two distinct buckets: human capital and token capital.
Token capital.
Right. He argues that renting a frontier model from OpenAI gives a company absolutely zero competitive advantage because your competitors can rent the exact same model.
Naturally.
The true edge, he asserts, is building a proprietary learning loop of company-specific workflows, data, and judgment. His ultimate test of control is simple. If you swap out the underlying foundational model for a different one, does your company's expertise stay intact? If yes, you own your token capital. If no, you are just a tenant renting someone else's compute.
Nadella is essentially saying the AI model should just be a replaceable AA battery. The true enterprise value is the machine you put the battery into. If you don't own the machine, you have zero leverage.
That's a perfect analogy.
And the consumer data backs this up perfectly. Sensor Tower just released numbers showing that for the first time ever, ChatGPT has lost its market majority. It dipped to 46.4%.
That's a huge milestone.
Now, it's still the behemoth in the room with 1.1 billion monthly users compared to Gemini's 662 million and Claude's 245 million. But the monopoly is over. Users are freely switching between chatbots depending on the task. The game is no longer about who has the smartest conversational bot. It's an aggressive race to build agentic architecture.
And we can see this consolidation of token capital playing out in massive M&A deals. Look at SpaceX. They just executed a $60 billion all-stock acquisition of the AI coding startup Cursor.
$60 billion.
Yes, fueled heavily by SpaceX's shares surging past $200 post-IPO, which incidentally pushed Elon Musk's personal wealth over the $1 trillion mark. But they didn't buy Cursor to have a better chatbot. Cursor CEO Michael Truel stated their next model is designed to be generally intelligent and will integrate directly into SpaceX's Grok Build platform.
Right, they are building an autonomous engineering loop. Instead of a human engineer writing a script, testing it, and deploying it, Grok Build can do the entire workflow autonomously.
Exactly.
And this is happening everywhere. Salesforce just spent $3.6 billion to acquire Fin, specifically to plug Fin's 30,000 customers into their Agentforce lineup. You have a Japanese lab, Sakana AI, rolling out a system called Marlin. Marlin is an autonomous research agent that doesn't just answer a prompt. It can run for 8 hours straight.
Unsupervised.
Yeah. It searches the web, reads papers, synthesizes data, drafts a report, tests its own conclusions, and refines them while you sleep. And then Cartesia is launching Sonic 3.5 and Ink 2, pairing seamless speech and transcription. Everyone is rushing to build the machine, not the battery.
However, this aggressive transition to autonomous agent ecosystems introduces a severe friction point. As these learning loops become deeply integrated into corporate infrastructure, companies are realizing they need these agents to operate in the physical world. They have to interact with daily human workflows.
Which is messy.
Extremely. This is where the pristine mathematical logic of token capital collides with the unpredictable nature of human capital. And the result is an intense, visceral rejection.
It's a massive culture clash. Let's look at the hardware push first, because taking these agents off the screen requires physical sensors. A startup called Odyssey just raised a $310 million Series B, led by Natural Capital and Amazon, to build what they call world models.
Which requires a brief distinction here. A standard text model predicts the next word in a sentence based on language rules. A world model predicts the next physical frame in a sequence based on spatial awareness and physics.
Like understanding gravity.
Right. If a robot drops a glass, a text model knows the phrase "the glass shatters." A world model understands the velocity, the surface tension, and exactly how the shards will scatter across the floor. That level of spatial computing is essential for autonomous vehicles and robotics, which is exactly why Amazon is heavily invested.
And the major consumer brands are chasing it too. Apple is reportedly testing AirPods with built-in cameras, scheduled for late 2027, just to give Siri visual context of your surroundings. Snap just debuted AR specs for see-through computing, but they cost $2,195. And JCal even noted that consumer viability for those glasses is still 1 or 2 generations away.
It's a massive capital sink.
But think about the disconnect here. We are literally building $2,000 augmented reality glasses and camera-equipped AirPods for a consumer base where 60% of people wince the second they see the acronym AI on a billboard.
The sentiment is terrible.
A WordPress VIP report released this week showed exactly that. 60% of U.S. consumers find AI messaging an immediate turnoff, and 86% do not fully trust AI outputs and demand original sources. So we're shoving cameras onto their faces when they actively distrust the technology.
The dissonance between capital expenditure and consumer sentiment is staggering. And it's even birthed counter-movements within the startup space itself. A founder named Thais Castello Branco launched Taste Labs with the specific codified mission to end AI slop.
I saw that went viral.
Yeah, she went viral because she's attempting to embed aesthetic design and human curation back into these models to prevent the internet from becoming a wasteland of synthesized mediocrity.
But it's not just the consumers who are rejecting this. The human capital, the very employees building these systems, are revolting. We are seeing a massive internal crisis at Meta right now. CTO Andrew Bosworth had to issue an internal memo apologizing for what he openly called an atrocious job. explaining a massive AI reorganization to the company.
It was a disaster.
Thousands of Meta employees were abruptly shifted into model training grunt work, which is incredibly tedious. You were essentially clicking and ranking AI outputs all day to map human intent.
And the internal culture at Meta has deteriorated so rapidly that employees have literally branded this new unit the Gulag. And the resentment was severely compounded by revelations that Meta implemented mandatory mouse tracking on its own employees simply to harvest their behavioral data for training these models.
Wait, they were tracking their own employees' mice?
Exactly. To train the agents, they are systematically alienating their human workforce to optimize their token capital.
And despite all of that internal chaos, Meta is shoving this data straight to the consumer anyway. They are currently rolling out Meta AI mode on Facebook, which replaces traditional search with synthesized answers pulled directly from public Facebook groups and Reels, powered by their Muse Spark model.
It's incredibly risky.
They're even testing paid tiers for this at $7.99 and $19.99 a month. But think about the risk there. If your AI agent is summarizing unvetted user posts from random Facebook groups to answer queries, you are creating a feedback loop that injects outdated, highly misleading information directly into the daily lives of millions of people.
So if we synthesize everything we've examined today, a very stark picture emerges. Structurally, the Western AI alliance is fracturing politically, fundamentally undermined by the mathematical reality that they cannot contain open weights models like DeepSeek or GLM 5.2.
Right.
Financially, the entire capital structure is bleeding, evidenced by OpenAI's unprecedented $38 billion operating loss and the industry's reliance on leveraged debt. To survive, the sector is desperately pivoting away from monolithic chatbot monopolies toward multi-model agent ecosystems, prioritizing proprietary learning loops. Yet the attempt to force these autonomous systems into physical hardware and existing human workflows is generating a severe backlash from both the consumer base and the human workforce required to build them.
We started this deep dive talking about the illusion of control. Washington thought they could control the math. OpenAI thought they could control the market. But the pristine math of engineering always collides with the messy reality of human systems. So I want to leave you with this to mull over. If Nadella's vision comes true, if token capital fully maps and replaces a company's human intuition, and our sovereign alliances are too broke to maintain the compute monopoly who actually dictates the learning loop of a nation's economy a decade from now, the government, the corporation, or the open source algorithm doing the thinking for free. Thank you for joining us on today's Deep Dive.
That concludes today's DJAMGAMIND Daily AI Intelligence Briefing. The strategic takeaway is simple. Artificial intelligence is moving beyond chatbots. The companies that dominate the next decade may not be those with the smartest models, but those that own the ecosystems where intelligence lives and evolves. As open models close the performance gap and users increasingly switch between assistants, the focus is shifting toward agents, workflows, developer platforms, and trusted relationships. From the G7 summit to SpaceX's acquisition of Cursor, from Microsoft's multimodal vision to ChatGPT losing its majority share, today's events point toward a new era where ecosystems matter more than individual models. Thank you for listening. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Neumann, senior software engineer and passionate soccer dad from Canada. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow the DJAMGAMIND Intelligence channel and share this briefing with colleagues, friends, and fellow AI enthusiasts. I'm Anna. Stay informed, stay adaptive, and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.